Welcome back. For this week's fly, we're going to go with the triple version of Tommy Lynch's Drunken Disorderly. Typically, you guys that have, first off, it's going to take a minute, so go grab a cold one, whatever, sit back, relax. This is going to take a minute. But also, anybody who has watched any of my videos in the past, you guys realize I'm pretty conservative, pretty traditional when it comes to color combinations, choices, and everything. We're going to break that mold today, and we're going to go with a Fire Tiger. So all rules go out the window the second you start throwing a 7.5 inch fly for trout anyhow. So let's just embrace the chaos and go with it. But we'll be zooming in and out a good bit on this one. So we're going to start out with an Ahrex TP 610 size 1 for our back hook. Make sure that we're somewhat centered there. Everything looks all right. And GSP 100 for this one. Right down where the gouge of the barb starts to come up is where your measurement's going to be for that one. Now we're going to take this orange and black barred Grizzly variant. Yeah, this is what we're going to tie in for our tail here. Let's see if I can get this to cooperate and then get it measured out. There we go. I have measurements on my vise to where I tie in, different materials, different tails and all that stuff. So it just helps with my overall consistency when I'm doing, multiples of one pattern. And it's a good little reminder for me too, so just helps with consistency. We're going to go ahead and get these deceiver style tails tied in if they're going to cooperate for me. This one has quite a twist in it. But we're just going to lay these right on top of the hook and run these to the back. Right to where we left off with our thread, and hopefully these things, they look good. Just take this right to the front, get some good wraps on there. Alright, so there we go. We got our deceiver style tail tied in. Next we're going to go, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. We're going to go with some flash. There's a ton of flash in the D&D. So we're going to take, this is just some angel hair, gold. It's got a little, I like using this flash that has, whether it's the Flashaboo or the hollow blends, whatever it is. I like the stuff that has like multiple colors in it. I don't think it makes one bit of difference at all to the fish, but aesthetically to a fly tire it looks, I don't know, to me at least, it looks better having multiple colors and different shades and everything in there. So this one's not real apparent, but it's got some gold, some reds, some oranges maybe. But I just kind of like the way that it looks. So I take that stuff just about back to the length of the tail, a little shorter if you want, but I usually keep it right at the length of the tail. Get rid of that, that's just going to be in the way. The next thing we're going to take is, this is going to be the most normal looking material we use today. This is some olive copper UV. And we're going to tie this in opposite direction. There we go. So we'll get this tied in. take this to your halfway point. Go ahead and tie that off. Then we're just going to work this around. Same as the D&D from the standard D&Ds and everything. This stuff all stays the same. The back hook, I mean, the only thing really different is the deceiver tail. But the other stuff stays pretty true to the original pattern. This stuff just is not wanting to cooperate for me here. I get 2 wraps and I'm going to pick all this stuff out without trying not to trap everything. There we go. So now we got our UV tied into the halfway point. Go ahead and trim this off. And we're going to take a couple of thread wraps over top just to secure that. And then I'm going to get a thread base down over the remainder of the hook. And get my tails cooperating again. There we are. Now, we're going to take this tiger barred rabbit strip for our body. This is it's got the yellow and orange. It's pretty wild looking material. But like I said, there aren't any rules. We're going to break them all with this pattern. And we're just going to go one wrap in front of the other all the way up to the front. Kind of as you work your way forward with this, with each wrap, because this isn't the crosscut rabbit that I like to use, this is just a regular rabbit strip, just kind of peel all of this stuff back before you make your next wrap. That way it'll kind of work its way, it'll kind of sit back toward the rear of the hook. And then with this last one, because we're not throwing another wrap over top of it, let me get this secured first. Because we're not throwing, I mean, obviously you have to have a last wrap. We're just going to work our way back with our thread. And the main portion that you're worried about getting to lay back here is your underneath side, because we're going to throw this, we're going to throw a mallard flank over top of this, and it's going to hold everything back for us, so we're going to be good there. So what we have is just a regular, well, not regular, this is a yellow mallard flank. And we're going to set this over the top, just a little bit past where your tail starts. Go ahead and get this set in here. Trim this off. Make sure the monitor's still looking all right there. Everything looks good. Get this tied in, going right down the center. Get a loose wrap or two. And then a few tight ones right over top. Now, take and trim your mallard flank, and our back hook is set. Dang, things want to fall. So there we go. We got our back hook ready to go. Before I go any further on this one, I'm just going to take and touch this up with some yellow. That's the wrong end. touch this up with some yellow. With a yellow marker here. And I'm gonna drop a zap on this too. Just kind of peel this all back, set it right where your mallard flank comes in. Just a little extra reassurance for me. So next we got a 35mm shank that has a bunch of junk on it. Oh well, whatever the heck that was. So there we go. We're going to run that shank right through the center. And that tail's going to fight me the entire time. I'll fix that before I take the picture. I'll just deal with it being the way that it is right now. So go ahead and take your shank and set that in. Get this out of the way before it causes a big commotion. And go ahead and start your thread. Get this covered up on, go ahead and cover up your shank and just get a thread base down on the front. I mean, it doesn't have to be a perfect thread base, just keep working your way through it. I got rabbit hair flying all over the place already. And hopefully by the time I get everything in here, I mean, it's going to sit to the back. It's going to be a little long. I mean, we're working in the center right now, but I mean, we'll be able to get the gist of it. I'll probably zoom in once we get the front hook anyhow, just to focus on building the head and trimming it and everything, so we should be good. So we got our shank tied in, everything's connected. We're going to take a good chunk of this angel hair. Find a good spot to trim this. And I'll set this right over the top. We're probably going to go 3/4 of the way back the mallard flank. Go ahead and get this tied in and then just fold it back over itself. If you're working with this angel hair especially, I mean, I recommend doing this with Flashaboo too, but especially with this angel hair, I mean, it is so thin. Always double it over like I did there. Don't try and tie one clump in and that's all it is, because it will slide out in no time. Make sure you get your extra, I mean, you get those secure wraps. And what the hell do I have just happened there? Yeah, we'll fix that little red wagon. Kind of slid off the side of the shank there, so we're gonna bring these around. This is a step I've started doing here lately anyhow with the Flashaboo. It just kind of flares it out a little bit more. If you make a couple of wraps behind it and then go right over the top of it. God bless the thing. There we go. Just kind of flares your Flashaboo out a little bit more. I know it's kind of tough to see with all the crazy colors and I'm kind of zoomed out a little bit. But if you make those 2 wraps behind it and then pull tight, it kind of flares, especially Flashaboo. It'll flare everything out a little bit and make it a little easier. I mean, it just gives a better appearance is all. So now we're going to go back to the rabbit strips. We're going to go ahead and get this tied in. Probably just past the 1/4 point on this shank is where we're going to wrap this to. Go ahead and get one complete wrap and give it a quick pinch. Give it a second. bring it up for a third. Oh, come on, get through there. There we go. Throw that together. And then just work your way back a little bit to where it kind of folds all of these. It's kind of folding. There we go. It's folding all this stuff back over, so it kind of just makes a skirt and covers up your connection point between your shank and your back hook. And go ahead and get a couple good solid wraps in there. And we're going to throw in, I'm going to save that for the front actually. I don't know, I'm undecided. Yeah, we're going to save that glass bead or the glass rattle for the front. I was going to throw it in the shank, but we'll keep it up front. Moral of the story there is, doesn't matter where you put the glass rattle, shank or front hook. Either one you choose will work. So back to our UV. Get this tied in. Leave yourself about, I don't know, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch at the front, because we're still going to tie in our lateral lines with the mallard flanks, and we're going to try and get one good wrap of rabbit right in the front. Yep, get back here. Get back here. This stuff just doesn't want to cooperate with me today. I got one that's just a little bit twisted, and every time I make a turn on it, all the fibers want to go toward the front. Wasn't able to get this one to straighten out how I normally can, but we're just going to struggle through it and work with it anyhow. Get one more wrap on this, we'll call it good. Get over here. And then same thing, just kind of peel this back a little bit. Run this over the top, get your materials coming back for you. And then we're going to go back to the angel hair. Don't be afraid about taking too much of this stuff. You can always cut it out later. I mean, if you look at it and you're like, yeah, it's just too much, you can always trim a little bit out, but it's really tough to add it after the fact. So we're going to go back right over top here, halfway back your last stack of flash. And same thing, just tie this in, work your way to the front. Give yourself a little bit of room to work with so you can double this over and set this in. Now we're going to find two good mallard flanks to work with here. That one's got way too much curve. These two might work. I don't want the biggest mallard flanks possible for this, because as always, I mean, I like to progress as I go to the front. So I'm gonna pick some, you know, I mean, just moderate sized flanks here. And I'm going to throw these in, one on each side. And then for my front ones, they're going to be the ones that are a little on the bigger side. So find some flanks that, you know, marry pretty well, that are in the ballpark of the same size, and get these tied in. Bring these one back on each side here. And get everything measured out. There we go. Everything's looking good. So we got our flash stacks in there, and this thing's just falling all over the place. I gotta get that fixed. So we got our stacks of flash in, we got our rabbit, we got the UV, everything's tied in, everything's looking good so far. The last thing that we're gonna do before we finish this portion of it up, and I forgot to pick these out. Where did they go? Way in the back, of course. I'll put all of those back on the rack here afterwards. But we're just going to take some... I was looking for some orange rabbit. I don't have it. So I'm going with this rust, and it's actually probably going to... Not that it matters at all. I mean, I'm tying an orange and yellow fly, but this rust is probably gonna actually match pretty well for, you know, the shades and everything that we're using. So I just want to get one, maybe two wraps of this right in the front, and I'm gonna stop with just one. Maybe get like 1.5 there. I don't want to rush the head too much. I don't want to rush the eye of this shank, because I want to be able to get my articulation wire and everything in there and not have a big mess to deal with. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave it right like that. I mean, I could clean this up a little bit more, but I got plenty of room. You can see my scissors are going to fit right through there. I got plenty of room to get my wire and everything in there, and this is all going to get covered up by our next wraps anyhow. So we're going to go ahead and get our whip finish in. And while I'm changing out now, if you're out of the beer you started with, now would be a good time to go get another one, because I'm just going to be tying in the articulation wire and running my mouth as usual. So go ahead and grab another one. For our front, we're going to go with a TP650 Ahrex. This is a 1/0. I don't know if I mentioned it or not. The back hook was a size 1, 35mm shank in the center. So we're going to take this one right to where the barb of the hook starts at the center again. You could get away with moving this one forward a little bit, but we're going to put our glass rattle in on this. So give yourself a little bit of extra room to work with. If you're omitting the rattle, you could probably go, you know, either at the point of the hook or in between the two, like where I have it hanging right now. And you can't see what the hell I'm doing because I'm zoomed all the way out. So you can have it right where the thread's hanging right now, between the 2 points, or right at the very front. But like I said, we're gonna throw in a glass rattle, so I just want to give myself enough real estate to where I'm certain that I'm not going to be rushed for anything. We'll get our wire tied in here. It's 0.38 Beadalon. And we're just going to zip right to the back. This is nothing new here. As you can see, I mean, we're starting a little downward descent right there. But once we get our bead in and we throw the articulation wire around, we put it around our shank, it's going to wind up being a straight line back, which is what you're looking for. What you don't want to do is go getting down to where your thread and your articulation wire's right here, and then you're trying to run it straight from back there, because what it's always going to do is it's just going to be winding. It's going to sit down at an angle. So you'll see, I mean, as I'll speak through it as I get the bead and everything in there, and you'll be able to see that we'll be running a straight line from the hook to the back section, and that's important for the swim and everything. Like I said, you go getting it on a downward angle and it's going to affect how your fly swims and all that. So where's my wire cutters? Here we go. Go ahead and grab your bead and get this thrown in. Grab our back hook or our back section. Bring this right around. That looks good so far. We'll get that tied in. Looks good. Looks good. So, as I was saying before, you can see, tail straightened out again. You can see this section right here. Get it to where the camera's right. The straight portion of our hook, this articulation wire follows it back. We're not going at a downward angle. We're not doing anything like that. This articulation wire is going straight back, which is what you're after. Avoid coming too far back, and you can see right where our bead is. I could have given this a little bit more room here. You can see the gap that I have. I could have given it a little bit more room to come back with, but I left it where it is. But right where your bead's touching, pull your wire that far and you're good. We have a nice straight line coming back. Everything's good. And we were able to give ourselves just a little bit more room to get these bead or that glass rattle in. So go ahead and work your way to the front with your articulation wire. I double it over. You don't have to. You can. I just like doing it. It gives me a little bit extra reassurance, and you know, you're not really worried about a taper on this fly because, I mean, look at it. It's just, there's a lot of fly, so you really don't have to worry about a taper too much on this one. We're going to go back to the angel hair, and I'm going to zoom out just slightly so we can get a, you know, kind of a full look at the fly. I'll stay zoomed out until I get closer to working on the head. There's a few things, I've been tying a lot of these here lately. There's a few different things that I'm doing that makes these heads a lot cleaner and a lot easier to work with, so I'll speak through that as we get through it. Just a couple of tips that just a couple of things that I've learned tying these things. So we'll try and pass those along. Alright, so same thing. Get your flash probably halfway back, 3/4 of the way back, your mallard flanks from the last one. And I'm going to swap back over to the GSP here. Get the GSP in here, and this is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying about going behind your Flashaboo or your angel hair, whatever it may be that you're tying with. If you go behind this, pull this a little, go behind, give it a pull this way, it will flare your materials out a little bit for you and just kind of fluff everything some. If you tie it straight back, all of the wraps are going to be right around that bundle, and they're going to wind up being real slender going back, and I don't know, as soon as the water hits it, it's going to move how it wants to anyhow. But this just on the vise looks a little better if you do it this way. So there you have that, my little ramble on flaring out Flashaboo. So now we're going to tie in our rabbit again. And before we advance anything on this rabbit, we're going to grab our glass. And it's going to be pretty close. So just go ahead and take, let me get this out of my mouth so you can hear what I'm saying. Take some Zap, and if you've watched the the updated October video, I tied in a glass rattle. I'm really starting to like these things. I started incorporating this into a lot more flies. Like I said, I like the way that it looks. No, not really the way that it looks, because you cover everything up, but I like that little rattle and everything, whether it does anything with the wavelength or not. But I have started getting addicted to using rattles, and I've started throwing them in a lot more flies. I'm just about at the bottom of my Zap here. Just go ahead and get that tied in, get it secured to your hook, and then throw some Zap on the sides, and it should, well, that does help with the security of it. So then, same thing, we're going to take this rabbit now, and we're going to go one wrap in front of the next until we get right to our glass. Get around there. And then tie this in front of the rattle. Grab a razor blade. This is going to give me a cleaner cut. It gets a little bulky, and not really bulky, but I mean, it gets to be to where you're kind of crammed for space and everything. But once you get everything, once you get your spacing and everything right, this winds up being pretty easy. And I mean, you don't really notice it being crowded after a while. It took me a decent amount of, well, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 of these flies to get all the spacing and everything right, and figure how many wraps I needed of each material to where everything fit on there and it wasn't just a big mess. So go ahead and get your UV puller tied back in, and we're going to take this right to the very front of the glass and no further than that. Let me find these glass rattles here, that way you guys, I'm obviously not too concerned about the length of the video on this one, so I don't mind searching for the rattles so you can see what I'm using on this one. These are the Wapsi, standard 4mm glass rattles that we're using, so that way you guys know what size I'm working with for spacing and all that stuff. You can use the micro ones too, it's just these ones make a little bit more noise, so I tend to go with those. And then get some loose wraps. throw some zap over top of your glass rattle. And these things are a little bit bulky. I'd like to find some more compact ones, but I haven't run across them yet. But just throw some zap over top of that. It'll help your UV puller stick slightly. Well, not slightly, I mean, it'll help it stick. It'll keep it from sliding off the rattle. And then tie this off right in front of your glass. Go ahead and trim it. And that's out of our way now. We're done with the UV puller. Go ahead and get that over there. Back to the angel hair now. This is a lengthy pattern, I know, so if you're still sticking with me after all my BSing and all of this tying here, I'll tell you what, you're doing alright. So, because if you tie this flash in now straight up and down like this, it's going to want to stick straight up and down. Go on both sides of your rattle, and I actually need, let me take a little bit more here. So what we're going to do is we're going to split the glass rattle on each side and allow this flash to sit that way. Like I said, if you try and go right over top of the rattle, it's going to stick up pretty bad. And work with less thread here. There we go. Work your way back to the glass. Fold this side over. And we'll go ahead and trim that right there. Now as you throw your mallard flank on, it's going to pull these, it's going to pull all this stuff. You can see it. It's kind of sitting out like wings right now. As you tie in our mallard, as we tie in the mallard flanks, it's going to pull this stuff back, and it's all going to just kind of blend right over the top. So it stays good even once it's in the waters. So don't get too concerned if you look at it and you're like, man, that stuff's just sitting off to the side and looks terrible. It will right itself. You'll see as we go along here. Now here's where we want to grab the bigger end of our mallard flanks. Hopefully I can find some without looking through this stuff too much. Like I said, I'm not really concerned about time on this one. If folks that are interested in tying this fly, they're going to stick around to the end, and the other ones are probably already on to something different already. So go ahead and get this tied in place, and I'm going to get my side in first. Get that flank tied in, and we're going to find another one that's going to marry this. That's going to be pretty close, and we'll get this one tied in on the other side. That one's beat to hell. Boy, this is a really rough pack of mallard flanks here. This one will work. This one will work. It's not perfect, but I could sit here and sort through these for 20 minutes trying to find a perfect one. So we'll go ahead and get this tied in. And you can see we have our nice lateral line going with the mallard flank. And when the water hits these things, I mean, it really brings this fly to life. It really does. I mean, on the vise it looks like it's pretty well compressed just because of the natural curve that the mallard flank has. But once the water hits it, these things flare out and it just looks like it's breathing. It's a really neat look when it's in the water. Last thing we're going to do before we get to the head, and I'll get zoomed in once we do that. The last thing we're going to do is get one wrap, maybe 1.5 of this rust colored rabbit. Probably just one, because I want to make sure that I leave myself enough room to get the collar and the head in. And all you really need is one. It's just enough to get that color accent that we're after. And we're gonna go one, maybe 1.5. Oh, come on. Yep, we got 1.5 good wraps on there. And we got the color that we're after. Everything looks pretty good. And we still have room once we peel this back to get our head in there. And I know it's tough to see because I covered this up with thread wraps, but our bend is starting right in front of these of the rabbit. So now we're gonna have this zoomed in. We're gonna walk through going through this head. Like I said, there's a couple of things I've been tying just an insane amount of number of these over the last couple of months, trying to get everything perfected, you know, and making the head how I want it and trying to figure out the easiest way to tie it, whatever it may be. But this is what I've settled on, and this seems to work pretty well for me. Working with the belly hair, the stuff that's dyed, seems so much easier. The problem with that is you have to find stuff that's long enough to work with. Some of it can get really short and be really frustrating and just not work at all. This stuff is a little bit more dense than using the Primo strips. It absolutely still works. This just looks a little cleaner to me, and it's a little bit easier for me to work with. So what we're gonna do is just measure this out. I know you can't see it with all of the stuff that we have on here, but actually I need to zoom out some. Just about out of the frame. There we go. Measure this out, and it's right about where the point of the hook is, maybe a little bit further back. Between the point of the hook and the barb, I guess we would call it. So get as much of this stuff as you can possibly work with. I mean, if it seems like it's just way too much material, add some more. I mean, get as much as you can to work with, and then flare this stuff up. And then what I'm going to do is just make a wrap, work my thread through this. I'm going to make another wrap, and then another one. So I just kind of work my way through this head, and what I'm doing is I'm forcing hair toward the bottom. So now when I peel all of this back, I'm gonna have material. I'm gonna have deer hair in the front and the bottom, or on the top and the bottom. So it's gonna be a nice clean material, or a nice clean back portion of the head. You can see that right there. I mean, I have the orange going the whole way around, but at the same time working through that, my collar is still just a half moon collar on the top. The security of it really seems to work well. I haven't had anything rotate on me doing it this way. And it seems to make a lot cleaner of a head, and it's a lot easier to trim and get the overall shape that you're after. So then I go through with this and I'll push this back and pack this tough stuff as tight as you possibly can and get as much material in here as you can. It just makes the head so much cleaner. Next we're going to put a little accent in here with yellow. And same thing, I mean, take a good chunk of this. There is a point to where you can get to where you're working with too much material, but I found that working with more makes these heads a lot cleaner and a lot easier than it is working with less, if that makes any sense. So I'm just going to take this yellow now, and we're going to trim all these tips up. We're going to get this yellow, and like once again, this is the belly hair. This stuff is so much easier to spin. Well, I can't say that it's easier to spin. It's just, it seems easier to work with for me with these wedged heads, you know, the SIDs, the D&Ds. You know, the Dungeons, the Cougars, absolutely go with the Primo stuff. But this stuff just seems to be easier to work with for me. So now you get your one complete spin in here, and you can see we have just a little bit of room to work with. We're going to take this packer and run this back. Then we're going to grab one more chunk of the orange, and I'm going to try and find the longest stuff that I can. And we'll get this. Clean out your deer hair, as always. You don't want to always clean your deer hair as much as you possibly can. Get that fuzz out of there, get everything out. It's going to spin a lot easier. It's just going to be a lot cleaner to work with. So we're going to set this on the top. Oh, you little so-and-so. Get back. Try this again. Like I was saying, clean your deer hair. It's easier to work with. Knox, stay out here, bud. Good girl. Good girl. Don't go knocking anything over. She's confused right now, doesn't know what to do. So, we'll attempt this again. Come through here, catch this in front of the eye. Make sure that we're good. I got a little close on the front there to where I didn't get a real good spin, but I got everything. I have a full portion of orange in front, and you'll see like when I trim this up, it's going to have that nice break that we're after. I got just slightly closer to the front than I wanted to be. I mean, we're talking, you know, a 1/16 of an inch. I didn't leave myself, but it's going to work out good once we get to trimming. It's going to look fine. I would have liked to have just had that little bit of extra room to get that full spin of deer hair, but everything's good. Now the mess really starts. We're gonna pull this back. And where did I put my comb at? We're gonna clean this up, just kind of pull all these materials forward, or fluff your hair out a little bit, and then we're off to the razor blade now. Before I get this going, let me just pull this back to where everything's good. Now we're gonna start on the top here. Find your center. And I'm just going to work this right through. Just a nice clean push. Not getting real aggressive on the first cut or two. I just want the overall shape, the overall profile. And then same thing on the bottom. Flip this over and go right through. Just the overall shape, the overall profile. That's what we're after. And we're doing this in baby steps. It's just, you can get real aggressive and just push right through this stuff and try and get the shape right from the very beginning. But I'm telling you, you're going to wind up messing up more of them than, I mean, until you get this really perfected, until you can just look at it and make your cuts and everything's good, you're going to wind up messing up more of them than you get right. So take your time, just come right through here and get your overall profile at the top and the bottom first. Now, we're going to turn this off to the side, just make a quick cut. And then the same thing on this side, we're going to make a quick cut. Now, we have our general shape that we're looking for with this wedged head. Now we're going to start refining things, and I'm going to push even further in on these cuts. Like I said, take your time with them. Do not rush these because you'll wind up tying the entire fly and then having the head ruin the entire thing if you push too fast, if you go trying to save time trimming this fly. Good girl. There, we're getting close. Just cleaning this up best I can. And another thing that I like to do, you'll see a lot of these, they have like a cup right in the center, and that just seems to catch more water and let it dart and dive some more. So what I'll do is I'll take my razor blade, get it in there, and I'll just cup this and I'll run this right through the center of the top. I don't know how well that's going to pick up in the camera. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. You can see that little cup. That just seems to catch some more water and kick it to the side a little bit more, you know, make it a little bit more erratic. I've messed around with it a little bit. You know, taking notes on what they do in the water and whether there's an added benefit to doing it or not. And it does seem to move it around a little bit more, so I do that. I mean, it just takes another second or two to get that cut right. But that is where I think we're gonna stop this one, because I've subjected you guys to enough of my rambling and nonsense already. So I didn't cut anything out of this one. We just did a straight cut the entire way through, and I know it was a lot of fly to watch. But before I go taking the picture of this one and getting it ready for the video, or getting it ready for the camera, what I'll do is I will, I'll clean this up. I'll put the eyes on it. I'll put the UV and everything on there and get everything, camera worthy or picture worthy before I get taking it. But you get the overall gist of what we're doing on with this triple D&D, and we did it in just some obscene colors. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you're able to hang around with me long enough to see it to the end. But there's Tommy Lynch's Fire Tiger, Drunk and Disorderly. If you guys have any questions, comments, if you want to tell me to speed the hell up and quit wasting your time, leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you. But thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you next week.